The year was 1826, and the Peloponnese was burning. Ibrahim Pasha's Turco-Egyptian army, drilled in modern European tactics and feared across the Mediterranean, marched relentlessly through Greece. Towns crumbled, villages fell silent, and resistance seemed impossible. Yet, in the fortress of Diros, a woman named Margarita stood with steel in her hands and fire in her heart. In one palm, she gripped a pistol, an heirloom from her grandfather, who had fallen in the Orlov Revolt of 1770. In the other, she held the curved blade of her father's ancestor, a pirate slain in the Ottoman-Venetian wars of the 17th century. For Margarita, these weapons were more than tools of war. They were the symbols of a bloodline steeped in defiance, sacrifice, and rebellion. As the Ottoman forces advanced, she raised her pistol toward the invaders, embodying the essence of her people. They were the Maniots, guardians of a land that had never truly submitted to empire, descendants of warriors who claimed Spartan blood, and a nation within a nation, forever proud, forever unmet. This moment, part legend, part history, captures the soul of Mahani. The Maniots were not ordinary Greeks. They were a people of contradictions, both pirates and freedom fighters, raiders and defenders, violent in their vendettas, but loyal in their kinship. Their very identity was forged in struggle. From the days of the Byzantines to the rise of the Ottomans, they stood apart, hardened by mountains, famine, and centuries of war. To outsiders, Mahoney was a land of wolves, filled with bandits and blood feuds. But to those who lived there, it was sacred ground, a harsh homeland that demanded resilience and repaid loyalty with survival. The story of Margarita is more than just a tale of one woman on a fortress wall. It is the story of an entire people who, when faced with overwhelming odds, chose never to yield. The Ottomans could invade their valleys, burn their villages, even slaughter their kin. But they could never truly conquer Mani. It remained the wolf's den of Greece, a land where freedom was not granted by kings or empires, but guarded by the will of its people. To understand the Maniots, one must first understand Mani itself. The Mani Peninsula juts out like a dagger from the southern Peloponnese, its spine a chain of rugged mountains plunging into the Aegean and Ionian seas. This geography is not a backdrop, it's a character in their story. The mountains made Mani nearly impenetrable to foreign armies. Narrow passes, jagged cliffs, and barren valleys formed natural walls against invasion. For centuries, conquerors like the Byzantines, Franks, and Ottomans learned the same lesson. Mani was a land not worth the blood it would cost to subdue. But isolation came with its own demands. The land was harsh, dry, and stingy with its resources. Water was scarce, and the soil yielded little. The Maniots became masters of adaptation. They built cisterns and wells, carved terraces for olive trees, and coaxed honey, nuts, and modest vineyards from the rocky earth. Agriculture sustained them, but the sea gave them power. Bays dotted the coastline, perfect for launching small ships. From these harbors, Maniot pirates and traders sailed into the Mediterranean, raiding, smuggling, and sometimes trading in the shadows of greater empires. Even their architecture bore the mark of their world. Families lived in longhouses, extended clans under one roof, bound together for survival. The elites, chieftains, and pirate captains built towers and fortresses, not just to guard against outsiders, but against rival clans. These stone citadels rose like jagged teeth across the hills, symbols of both protection and perpetual conflict. The geography of Mani made its people hard and independent, shaping a society where every man carried arms. Every woman was ready to defend her home, and every clan stood on the edge between survival and destruction. It was not merely a homeland, it was a fortress of stone, of sea, and of spirit. Maniot culture was a paradox, fiercely communal within clans, yet endlessly divided among them. Society revolved around large patrilineal families that often feuded for generations. A single insult or a stolen plot of land could ignite vendettas lasting decades, sometimes centuries. Blood had to be repaid with blood, and no grudge was ever truly forgotten. These feuds created a world where trust rarely extended beyond one's own kin, but also a world where loyalty to family was absolute. It was a society built on honor, vengeance, and survival. At the top of this world were the Nicpliano, the elite warrior families who owned land and commanded pirate fleets. Below them were the Asham-no-Toroi peasants, bound to the soil and often to the whims of their overlords. Yet, unlike other regions of Greece, even the poorest Maniot carried arms. Women, too, were no passive bystanders. Travelers reported Manioid women marching alongside men in battle, pistols and knives at their belts ready to fight. They raised sons not for peace, but for war. Still, this was a patriarchal world. Men ruled the councils, men led the clans, and men made war, but women, through resilience and fierce loyalty, upheld the foundations of Manid society. Despite this martial life, Manids were not without art. Their tradition of songs revealed a poetic depth. Sung by women at funerals, these laments mourned the dead while preserving their memory in haunting verses. They told of bravery in battle, of betrayals, of loves lost to vendettas. In a land where death was never far, mourning became both ritual and history. Thus, the culture of Mani was as much about grief as it was about defiance. It was a world where vendetta and lament were two sides of the same coin, people who sang of death, even as they embraced it in life. The roots of Mani stretched deep into the soil of Greek history. In myth, Cape Tanaros at the southern tip was sacred to Poseidon, where dolphins carried the sea god to shore. It was also known as a gate to the underworld, a place where heroes sought passage to Hades. By the Archaic period, Mahoney was under Sparta's dominion, and his people became forever tied to the legacy of the Spartan warrior state. Later generations, seeing the ferocity of the Maniots, imagined them as the last true Spartans, untainted by the centuries. The myth of Spartan blood became part of Maniot pride, even if history told a more complex tale. Through the centuries, Mahoney endured the rise and fall of empires. Under Rome, Sparta itself became a curiosity for tourists, but Mahoney remained remote. With the dawn of Byzantium, Christianity spread through the empire. Mahoney resisted, while Constantinople and Athens embraced the cross. Maniots continued to worship the old gods. For more than 6 centuries after the rest of Greece, they poured libations to Olympus, clinging to ancient ways until the 10th century, when missionaries like Nikon Metonite finally brought orthodoxy to Mahoney. Their conversion, however, did not make them docile. When the Crusaders carved up Byzantium after 1204, Mahoney fell under Latin rule, absorbing castles and feudal structures from the Franks. When the Byzantines returned under the despotate of Mithras, Mahoney again stood apart, preparing itself for the next great struggle, the clash with the Ottoman Turks. When Sultan Mehmed conquered the Peloponnese in 1460, he knew better than to bleed his armies on Mani's cliffs. Instead, the Ottomans sought tribute, a token of submission without full conquest. But the Maniots were not easily cowed. Under leaders like Crocodilos Cleitus, they allied with Venice, raided Ottoman garrisons, and turned piracy into both livelihood and resistance. Ottoman armies marched, fleets sailed, but Mahoney always fought back, retreating into its mountains when overwhelmed, and returning to strike again. Across the 16th and 17th centuries, Mahoney became infamous for piracy. Its warlords commanded fleets that raided Ottoman coasts, captured ships, and even trafficked in slaves. They joined wars alongside Venetians, Italians, and Spaniards, always seeking allies against the Sultan. Some Maniot families even fled to Corsica, founding colonies that preserved their language and Orthodox faith while continuing their piratical ways. Time after time, the Ottomans retaliated with devastating force, burning villages and scattering clans, but never did they fully break Mani. It was a land too fractured to conquer, too united in its defiance to destroy. The Orlov Revolt of 1770 brought Mani into the wider stage of European politics. When Catherine the Great's Russia tried to stir Greece into rebellion, Maniot warlords rose eagerly, but when Russia abandoned them, the Ottomans struck with fury, devastating the peninsula for a decade. Still, Mahoney survived, paying only token tribute while remaining largely autonomous. They had become a people defined by piracy, rebellion, and an unyielding independence, a thorn in the side of empire. When revolution swept Greece in 1821, Mahoney was ready. The secret society Philiki Iterea had found fertile ground among the clans. And when the call to arms came, the Maniots were among the first to raise their banners. The Mavromiclus family, feared and respected chieftains, rallied the clans and stormed into battle. They fought at Tripolitsa, where Ottoman power in the Peloponnese was shattered, and at Valtetsi and Dervenekia, where Greek arms won stunning victories. But the tide turned when Ibrahim Pasha, commanding a modern Egyptian army, landed in Greece. His troops crushed Greek resistance with brutal efficiency. Whole regions surrendered, but not Mahoney. In 1826, Ibrahim marched on Mahoney itself, expecting another swift conquest. Instead, he found a wall of defiance. At Polyaravos and Dairos, Maniot men and women fought side by side, ambushing the Egyptians, striking from towers, and repelling the invaders. Margarita's legend is rooted in this moment, when Mahoney became the last bulwark of the revolution. Their defiance gave Greece the time it needed for Western powers Britain, France, and Rushat to intervene. Without Mahoney, the revolution might well have died. With them, Greece won its freedom. Independence did not tame Mahoney. When the Greek Republic was founded, Maniot warlords resisted central authority. They clashed with President Ioannis Kapodistrias, and when he imprisoned Petrobim of Romiclus, the Maniots responded with assassination. When King Otto of Bavaria tried to impose monarchy, Mani defied him too, forcing him to negotiate peace after repeated failed invasions. Even as Greece modernized, Mahoney held on to its traditions. Vendettas continued well into the 19th century. Blood debts, haunting villages like ghosts that refused to fade. Yet Mahoney also gave Greece leaders, generals, and heroes. Families, like the Mavromiclus, became pillars of the new state. Maniots fought in revolts in Crete and Macedonia, stood against the Nazis in World War II, and divided among themselves in the Greek Civil War. Through centuries of upheaval, they remained warriors at heart. Today, Mahoney is quiet, its towers standing as stone memories of a fiercer time, its economy fed by tourism more than piracy. But the identity endures. The Moirology are still sung, the towers still cast shadows, and the name Mani still evokes independence and pride. The story of the Maniots is not one of saints or sinners. They were raiders and pirates, yet also patriots and rebels. They preserved pagan faith long after the world had changed, yet became pillars of orthodoxy. They carried vendettas for generations, yet sang laments that softened even the hardest of hearts. They were contradictions, but that is what made them unforgettable. Like the mountains they called home, they were jagged, harsh, and unyielding. And like Margarita on the ramparts of Dibros, they stood with pistol raised and declared to the empires of the world, "You shall not pass."